I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer calls for bipartisan support in passing more COVID relief on the Senate floor Tuesday. He chastises his colleagues across the aisle for blocking additional spending. Schumer believes if there is not additional funding for COVID, the country could face another shutdown in the future. This comes just 1 month after President Biden signed a $1.5 trillion spending package. That massive spending bill included funding for Ukraine. Here's more from the New York senator.
As we begin this 5-week work period, Senate Democrats' focus will remain the same as it's been since last year, fighting inflation and lowering costs for American families. At times, we will pursue this goal through legislation, as has been the case with our competition bill, with legislation to reform shipping practices that we passed recently, or finding ways to lower prescription drug costs. And to that end, today, the Agriculture Committee is also holding a hearing on legislation to improve transparency in meat prices. In addition to legislation, Senate Democrats will also help lower costs by confirming the right people to serve in the federal government. On that note, we will aim today to finish the confirmation of Lael Brainerd to serve as Vice Chair of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Soon, the Senate will also work to confirm another very important nominee, Mr. Alvaro de Bedoya, to serve as Commissioner of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. Of all the agencies in the federal government, the FTC is among the best equipped for protecting Americans from price gougers, manipulators, and those trying to rip off American consumers. Or at least the FTC would be if it had full membership. But sadly, the FTC has been stuck at a 2-2 deadlock for well over a year, rendering it incapable of executing the full breadth of its agenda. We've had 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. The Republican nominees have resisted going after big oil and so many of the other excesses of corporate America. And who pays the price? In a very literal sense, it's American consumers, as they see prices rise on everything from groceries to the number that pops up every time they fill up their tank. But the story is grossly different in corporate America, and an FTC with full membership could shine a light as to why. While Americans across the board are making sacrifices to support themselves and their families, corporate America is raking in record profits. As one article from Yahoo Finance summarized earlier this year, corporate America's 2021 profits were higher than ever. Corporate America's profits were higher than ever. Perhaps no sector has evoked more frustration and anger from the American people as the largest oil and gas companies and the prices they are charging. Last year, the top 25 oil and gas companies reported $205 billion in profits. Where's that money gone? To help American consumers? No way. To ease our energy troubles? Not at all. According to one news source yesterday, 28 of the largest oil and gas companies gave out $394 million in CEO compensation. And in the fourth quarter last year, stock buybacks among these companies rose by more than 2,000%. 2,000%. All this extra money they're making, they put in the pockets of the CEOs and the wealthy shareholders who dominate in the oil company ownership. Just think about that. Americans are paying more and more at the pump and struggling to afford the basics. And oil companies, which are seeing their highest profits in years, prefer to reward executives and shareholders through corporate buybacks instead of American families. Once we have an FTC with full membership, they will finally have the will, the means, and the power to look under the hood of America's energy sector and shine a much-needed light on why big oil is pumping out record profits even as consumers struggle. So completing the membership of the FTC will be a priority, and we will work to finish the confirmation on Mr. Bedoya as soon as we can. On Ukraine, later this week, President Biden is expected to send Congress another request for emergency funding to support the people of Ukraine in their fight against Russian aggression. When the President makes his request, the Senate should be ready to work quickly to approve this funding. Every penny of American aid has been money well spent, This fight, in a real sense, is about tyranny versus democracy itself. It's a Manichaean struggle. It has been 2 months since Vladimir Putin began his immoral and savage war against the Iranian people. You see the pictures, it breaks your heart, breaks your heart. Savagery of Mr. Putin, killing women and children, innocent people. So far, though, things have gone disastrously for Russian troops, as hopes for a quick invasion have been all but dashed. The Ukrainian people, forced into a war not of their choosing, and having suffered losses of inhumane proportion, have given Putin a much tougher fight than he ever bargained for, than he ever imagined. Outnumbered and out-equipped, the bravery and valiance of the Ukrainian people remains unbroken. Putin, meanwhile, is increasingly the most isolated leader in the world, although parenthetically, shame on the world leaders who are playing footsie with him, including China. But the Ukrainian people still need our help. Sadly, this fight seems far from over, and losses for the Ukrainian people have been severe. The United States has a moral obligation to help the Ukrainian people with the tools they need for as long as they need them. Again, this is about tyranny versus democracy itself. In which direction will the world turn in this, the 21st century? Once the President makes his request to Congress, approving additional aid for Ukraine will be a must. I expect both sides to work with swift bipartisan cooperation to get it done. I also expect the Senate to move quickly on the nomination of President Biden's choice for our ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink. Ms. Brink's nomination is terrific news that comes at a critical moment. She's deeply experienced. She's already won bipartisan support in this chamber and is very much needed as the U.S. seeks to strengthen our diplomatic ties to the war-torn nation. Ms. Brink's nomination will be a top priority for the Senate once she comes before the chamber. On COVID relief. Finally, there's another issue which Republicans must work with Democrats, passing another round of COVID relief. COVID funding is not a matter of nice to have if we can afford it. COVID funding is a must-have. It is something our nation cannot possibly afford to go without. Yesterday, the White House made clear that other countries like Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam are already in front of us when it comes to purchasing new vaccines and treatments. American companies, with their ingenuity, come up with these vaccines and treatments, but because we're unwilling, our Republican colleagues so far have blocked financing this, other countries are going to buy from us. We don't want to be in a position in the fall where we desperately need these medicines, but our companies have signed contracts with other countries. And that would be a huge mistake. Given our federal budget, it's a small amount to ask that we provide money for these therapeutics so that we can have them, our country, for our folks, as much as the rest of the world may need them, so that we have vaccines, the best vaccines, developed and ready to go, so we have enough testing and treatment. But other countries are beating America to the punch because Republicans have blocked the Senate from approving new funding. The answer to avoiding another shutdown of our communities is very simple. Senate Republicans should work with us to quickly pass another round of COVID funding. It's not more complicated than that. Let me say it again. If we want to keep life as close to normal down the line, if we want to keep schools and churches and businesses open, if, God forbid, another aggressive variant arises, Republicans should work with us to approve more money for vaccines, testing, and life-saving therapeutics. The longer that Senate Republicans hold out on working with us to approve new funding, the higher the cost will be for our country down the line. And when we don't get back to normal, we can't stay at normal because of a new variant, people will know what happened. I yield the floor. God forbid that happens. We don't want it to happen. We want them to work with us. But unfortunately, so far, we're not seeing that cooperation. From some we have. I must be clear. I had good discussions with several of our Republicans, but then it was blocked by the Republican leadership. I yield the floor.